At exactly 3:17 a.m., the security camera caught Derek Hanley stepping into our flower bed with a jug of herbicide in one hand and a sick grin on his face. He didn't know I was watching from my phone, fists clenched, heart pounding, not stopping him, but studying him. Because sometimes the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one who strikes first, it's the one who waits, then strikes last. I never thought a flower bed could ignite a war, but the smell of peonies mixed with pesticide, the way my wife's sobs caught in her throat as she knelt beside the dying roses, those sounds, those images, they'll never leave me. It started like any dream does, quietly, with good intentions, and a sense of peace we hadn't felt in years. My name is Miles Jennings. I'm 45 years old, a retired Marine Corps intelligence officer, now working as a systems analyst for a cybersecurity firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. After 20 years in uniform, including deployments in Iraq, Syria, and Djibouti, I'd come to value peace more than glory. Jenna, my wife of 15 years, had been my anchor through every redeployment, every funeral, every nightmare. She's 40 now, a speech therapist who specializes in working with children with developmental challenges. Her calm, gentle presence was what gave kids the courage to speak their first words. But when she was alone digging in the soil, coaxing color from the earth, that's when she looked most alive. So when I got the job offer that let us finally afford a home in Cedar Ridge, she only had one condition. The front yard faces west, she said with a soft grin. Perfect light for lavender and roses. I should have known that dream would threaten someone. Cedar Ridge looked perfect on paper, quiet cul-de-sacs, neatly paved sidewalks, and a wrought iron sign that read, "Where community grows." But within a week, I started picking up signals. I'm trained to read people, spot the tension in their shoulders, the slight pause in their voice. Something here didn't quite fit the brochure. It started when Jenna began planting. She'd ordered heirloom seeds from a nonprofit nursery. Peonies, black-eyed Susan's roses, and lavender. She built a trellis for climbing varieties and used reclaimed bricks to edge the flower bed. Every weekend I'd help dig while she described the therapeutic benefits of each plant. Lavender calms the nervous system. Peonies are soft and inviting. And roses, they teach patience. She planned to use the space for her weekend speech therapy sessions with kids who needed something tactile, something living. Sometimes the garden speaks when the words don't. She told me once, brushing dirt from her forearm. The first time Vivian Crandall showed up, it was 7:03 on a Sunday morning. I was in the driveway rinsing the hose when I saw her blonde bob, crisp beige slacks, holding a leather-bound binder like it was the Constitution. She didn't greet me, didn't even smile, just stood at the edge of the lawn peering at Jenna, who was pruning a baby rose bush. "This violates our uniform landscaping standards," she announced. Her tone reminded me of a command sergeant major who hated being contradicted. Jenna looked up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Excuse me," Vivian pointed to the trellis. "That's an unauthorized structure, and we don't allow wildflower planting in front-facing yards." I stepped closer. "We read the guidelines," I said calmly. "There's no prohibition on floral beds or decorative structures under 4 feet." Vivian's mouth tightened. "The HOA reserves the right to approve aesthetic additions. Consider this your first notice." Then she turned and walked off, heels snapping on the sidewalk. I later learned that Vivian Crandall had been HOA president for nearly a decade. Rumor was she took over shortly after her only daughter died in a car accident, a girl who had loved gardening. Some said she used to tend a flower bed just like Jenna's once. But somewhere along the way, grief hardened into control and control into obsession. Within a week, we got our first formal citation, $150 for non-compliant landscaping. Then came the second citing soil disruption, exceeding 3 linear feet. I called the HOA hotline and left a message asking for clarification. No response. That Friday, Derek Hanley showed up. I spotted him walking toward the porch, a clipboard in one hand, a badge clipped to his belt, reading HOA compliance. He looked about 50, balding with a belly that said his best years were behind him. "Afternoon," he said flatly. "Need to photograph the property for record keeping." Jenna stepped out beside me. "Are we under investigation?" she asked, trying to smile. Derek smirked. "Let's just say you've attracted some attention." That night I did my own digging. Turns out Derek was a former sheriff's deputy fired after excessive force allegations. His hiring by the HOA wasn't accidental, it was strategic. Vivian had built herself an enforcement arm. and she was using it to crush anything that didn't fall into her version of order. Over the next month, things escalated. Jenna was called out in HOA bulletins. Our mailbox was vandalized. One evening, someone dumped mulch all over her flower bed. Still, she kept going. "I won't let fear pull up these roots," she told me, her voice barely above a whisper. Then came the breaking point. I woke up just past 3:00 a.m. to the sound of our motion sensor chime. I checked the security feed on my phone. 3 figures, Derek and 2 others clad in dark clothing, moving toward the garden. One carried a sprayer. I didn't go out. I needed more than confrontation. I needed evidence. We watched as they doused the flowers with a clear liquid, methodically covering each bloom, laughing as they worked. Jenna's hand clenched mine as her breath hitched. "They're killing them," she whispered. By morning, her garden was withering. The leaves were curling inward, stems sagging, the color drained like blood from a wound. She knelt in the dirt, silent tears streaming as she touched the limp petals of a rose she'd nurtured from a bare root. I filed a police report, brought them the footage. The officer barely looked at the screen before closing his notebook. "Not enough to prove intent," he muttered. "Could be fertilizer runoff." When I pressed, he gave me a name: Martin Clay, HOA counsel. Turns out he was also on the city zoning board. That's when I realized we weren't just dealing with petty tyrants. We were dealing with a closed-loop system of influence and immunity. Jenna didn't speak for hours. That evening, I found her sitting on the porch staring at the dying garden. "Maybe we should just move," she said. "Start over somewhere quiet." I sat beside her and took her hand. "You taught me that speech matters," I said gently. "Well, this garden, it speaks. And we're not done talking." The next day, I visited Angela Torres. She lived 4 doors down, a civil rights attorney who'd once sued the school district over ADA compliance. She listened quietly, then poured us both coffee. "Document everything," she said. "Every fine, every visit, every threat. And you're not alone, Miles. You're just the first one who won't roll over." She introduced me to Luther Grant, a 70-year-old retired Air Force mechanic who'd lived in Cedar Ridge for 25 years. "They tried to cite me for wind chimes," he said, laughing dryly. "Said they disrupted neighborhood tranquility." Over the next week, I started building a timeline, organizing the citations, transcribing voicemail threats, and indexing our security footage. Vivian's empire, I realized, was built not on law but on fear and iron grip strengthened by silence. But fear only works until someone stands up. That night, I replaced the front lawn sign with one I carved myself. It read, "The garden will grow again." And as I sat beside Jenna, watching the moonlight catch the edge of her tear-streaked face, I realized something deeper. This wasn't about flowers. It never had been. It was about the right to live in peace, to nurture beauty, to speak without being silenced. And I had fought for that right in deserts and jungles halfway across the world. I sure as hell wasn't going to surrender it in my own front yard. The garden died slowly, and so did the silence. For days after the attack, Jenna moved like a ghost through the house, her hands idle, her eyes fixed on things that weren't there. I caught her once tracing the empty trellis like she was trying to remember the shape of what had grown there. I'd seen that look before on soldiers who'd lost something that couldn't be replaced. And I realized then this wasn't just about flowers anymore. It was about reclaiming ground that someone else had tried to salt and burn. We weren't backing down. Not now. Not after this. The HOA might have expected us to give up or sell out like the others they'd steamrolled, but they hadn't counted on who I was or who we were together. Jenna wasn't just a woman who loved gardening. She was a healer, a builder. And I wasn't just a husband. I was a strategist with a decade of intelligence work under my belt and 2 brothers in arms a phone call away. So I made that call. Troy Keller and Emmanuel Brooks were more than former Marines. They were the kind of men who could disappear into a room and reappear with your secrets. We'd served together in Kandahar, but now they ran private intel outfits that danced just on the edge of legal. "Need recon or leverage?" Troy asked without ceremony. "Both," I replied, "and we keep it clean." They arrived within 48 hours each with a duffel full of gear and a quiet, familiar intensity in their eyes. Jenna looked up when they stepped through the door, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her face. So she said softly, "We're going to war after all." "Not war," I told her, pulling her close. "Correction." Step 1 was mapping the enemy. Troy planted discreet cameras and microphones near Vivian's house, Derek's truck, and the HOA clubhouse. Emmanuel used a signal analyzer to intercept non-encrypted radio chatter and monitor cell activity. We weren't listening to content that would have crossed a legal line, but we tracked patterns, movement, timing. Meanwhile, I launched a secure website under a pseudonym, cedartruth.org. Its only content at first was our story, the poisoning, the cover-up, the video footage. I ended the post with one question: have you experienced this too? Within 24 hours, 6 anonymous submissions came in. Within a week, that number was 39. And the patterns were unmistakable. Families fined for solar panels, widows harassed over patriotic lawn decor, renters threatened for unauthorized guests. Vivian's control was deeper and more calculated than we'd guessed. Then Jenna gave me an idea that changed everything. What if I invited my kids, she said one morning, sipping coffee with both hands like she needed the warmth to keep her steady. Not for therapy, just to visit. Let them see what happened. Let their parents see too. I stared at her. You want to bring special needs kids to see a crime scene? No, she said, her voice clear now. I want them to see that something beautiful was destroyed, and I want the community to see who it was destroyed for. That Saturday, 5 families showed up. Jenna had taught these children for years, kids with autism, Down syndrome, speech apraxia. They gathered in the yard like they were visiting a familiar friend. One boy, Leo, normally nonverbal, knelt beside a wilted lavender stem and whispered, "It smells sad." His mother burst into tears. Another girl, Maya, traced the edge of a broken planter and asked if she could help fix it. A few parents filmed the scene on their phones, sharing the footage in local parenting groups. But the moment that changed everything came when Vivian herself showed up. She must have seen the cars or caught wind of the gathering. She marched up the sidewalk in a beige cardigan and sunglasses, flanked by Derek and Martin like some HOA Secret Service. "This is unauthorized assembly," she barked, her voice slicing through the warm air. "This is still HOA managed property, and you are violating community protocol." One of the parents, a woman named Simone who worked as a local news producer, stepped forward. "Are you seriously trying to shut down a therapeutic visit for disabled children?" Vivian didn't flinch. "They don't belong here," she said without hesitation. Simone was already recording. The video, Vivian berating special needs families while a child clutched a dead rose, hit social media that afternoon, and it caught fire. By Monday, the story had been picked up by a local blog. By Wednesday, it made the regional news. Neighborhood garden war sparks outrage. After HOA, president confronts special needs children. That was the headline. The footage aired on the evening news. Vivian's voice, cold and dismissive, played over images of children crying. Public sentiment turned fast. Even long silent neighbors began whispering support. Anonymous messages poured into cedartruth.org, including photos, audio files, financial receipts. Derek, we learned, was billing the HOA over $5,000 a month for enforcement patrols. Vivian had made 5 ATM withdrawals from the HOA account in 3 months, each coinciding with trips to Blue Ridge Casino. Martin, meanwhile, was found to have authored dozens of letters threatening homeowners with foreclosure for minor code violations. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was a racket. The tipping point came one rainy Thursday night. I was working late in my home office, listening to encrypted radio chatter, when I heard something strange, Derek's voice garbled but close. I checked the front camera. He was in my yard, with 3 others. One carried a crowbar, another had a can of spray paint. I stepped into the hallway, quietly texting Troy and Emmanuel. We'd prepared for this. Troy was already positioned behind the side fence. Emmanuel was watching from the neighbor's garage. I waited behind the door, calm and silent. The kind of quiet that comes from knowing you're ready. Derek pounded on the door. "Come out and take your lumps, Jennings," he growled. "We'll show you what happens to cowards who hide behind cameras." That was enough. I swung the door open. Derek raised the crowbar, but I blocked it with a baton I kept behind the umbrella stand and spun him off balance. Troy took out the second man with a tackle. Emmanuel grabbed the third. The fourth bolted. We didn't hurt them. We restrained them. And we recorded everything. 10 minutes later, the county sheriff arrived, someone outside the HOA's circle. I handed over the footage, gave our statements. Derek was still swearing as they put him in cuffs. "You'll regret this," he spat. "I have friends." "Yeah," I replied quietly. So do I. That night, Jenna held me for a long time, her hands shaking. I thought they were going to kill you, she whispered. They were never going to win, I said. They just didn't know it yet. Because this wasn't revenge. This was exposure. It was tactical, precise, and now it was public. The next morning, the video of the attack joined the others on our site. The local news followed up with a special report. Simone arranged for a local legal expert to analyze HOA abuse patterns live on air. Suddenly, people outside of Cedar Ridge were paying attention. But the part that mattered most wasn't the media or even the evidence. It was the way neighbors started changing. Families who had stayed quiet for years began walking by and waving. A retiree from 3 blocks over brought Jenna a tray of lemon bars and whispered, "I used to be scared of them too." The fear was breaking. And fear once broken doesn't rebuild easily. Vivian issued a statement through the HOA lawyer blaming misinformation and internet gossip. But nobody was buying it anymore. Not after what they'd seen, not after what we'd shown them. As the sun set that evening, Jenna and I stood by the flower bed. New shoots were already sprouting volunteers from deeper roots that hadn't been killed. She knelt to touch one. They tried to destroy something soft, she said. But softness doesn't mean weakness. I looked out over the neighborhood, and I knew the real battle was just beginning. But now we weren't fighting alone. Now we had an army, quiet, steady, growing like roots beneath the surface, waiting for the next bloom. The night after the attack, I barely slept. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the windows made my pulse spike. Jenna lay beside me, bruised but calm, her fingers laced with mine like an anchor. We'd survived the assault, and the footage was already backed up to 3 separate cloud servers and a flash drive in a lockbox under our bed. Troy had reviewed the video twice quietly, noting the precision of Derek's strike and the unmistakable intent in his posture. Emmanuel had already forwarded the footage to the county sheriff's office officers unconnected to the local HOA network, and I'd given them a sworn statement. Jenna's medical report was clear contusions to the cheekbone, possible hairline fracture, defensive bruising on her forearms. The doctor wrote the word assault in bold print at the top of the file. It was more than evidence, it was truth, and truth has power when you refuse to bury it. The next morning, I filed a formal restraining order against Derek Hanley and submitted a cease and desist letter to the HOA demanding Vivian's immediate recusal from all leadership activity pending investigation. Angela Torres, ever the legal tactician, moved swiftly, filing a community motion for full financial transparency under North Carolina HOA statutes. She cited 22 separate violations, including concealed expenditures, unapproved vendor contracts, and failure to disclose board meeting minutes. Vivian, of course, refused to respond officially. Instead, she released a memo to residents accusing Jenna and me of fabricating an elaborate smear campaign rooted in personal vendettas and psychological instability. But the community wasn't buying it anymore. Not after seeing Derek in handcuffs. Not after hearing the stories shared on Cedar Truth. Org stories that painted a picture of years of intimidation, fines without hearings, and deliberate character attacks against anyone who dared speak up. Luther Grant, ever the steady voice in the storm, suggested we hold a town hall, not an HOA meeting, but a real community assembly. "Let's put it in the open," he said, his voice gravelly but firm. "Let people decide what kind of neighborhood they want to live in." We booked the local rec center and invited everyone. Jenna stood at the front of the room with me, still healing, still standing. Angela presented the financial records we'd uncovered, over $86,000 in unexplained withdrawals in the past 3 years. Several traced to cash machines inside the Blue Ridge Casino. One file revealed Martin Clay's law firm had billed the HOA for over $30 in consulting services despite no known contracts or deliverables. Then we played the video, Vivian confronting the families at our house, Derek threatening me, the final confrontation where Troy and Emmanuel restrained the attackers while I calmly de-escalated. The silence in the room was deafening. Then someone clapped, then another, and then the entire room stood, not cheering, just standing, the kind of silent unity that speaks louder than any chant. Angela called for a vote, a motion to initiate an independent audit and a special election to remove the current HOA leadership. The motion passed with 87% support. Vivian didn't show her face that night. Martin released a statement the next day claiming all actions taken were within legal precedent, but it was clear the walls were closing in. The sheriff's office officially opened an investigation into Derek's assault, as well as HOA financial conduct. A forensic accountant, a retired neighbor named Gloria Fields, volunteered to examine the books. Her findings were devastating: kickbacks from vendors, inflated service fees, and falsified maintenance reports. Vivian had built a fiefdom on manipulation and silence, and now that silence had shattered. Derek was formally charged with felony assault and trespassing, and a judge granted Jenna a 5-year protective order. Martin's legal license was suspended pending review for ethics violations. Jenna's story aired on the local evening news not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. She turned a garden into a battleground, the reporter said. And from that ground, something stronger is now blooming. A week later, we held the election. Angela was voted in as interim HOA president. Luther accepted the role of vice president. Jenna declined a position on the board, but agreed to lead a new community wellness initiative. I was asked to head security oversight, but turned it down. Instead, I registered a nonprofit, Bloomwatch, designed to support homeowners dealing with abusive HOAs across the country. We created a digital toolkit: how to document fines, how to identify legal overreach, how to rally a neighborhood, and we made it free. I didn't want revenge. I wanted prevention. The Cedar Ridge Charter was rewritten within 2 months. Financial transparency became mandatory. All board meetings were live streamed and open to homeowner participation. Fines were capped and required majority review before issuance. Derek's patrols were replaced with a volunteer-led safety watch team. Jenna's garden was replanted not by her hands alone, but by the entire block. Roses, lavender, peonies. Children helped dig the soil. One of Jenna's students brought a painted rock that read, "Hope grows here." I watched her place it beside the new climbing rose with reverence, her small hands dusted with earth. I've seen medals handed out in sandstorms. I've watched men weep at caskets draped in flags. But that moment, that quiet offering from a child, was the purest form of honor I'd ever witnessed. And the changes didn't stop with us. Other neighborhoods began reaching out. We were invited to speak at HOA reform forums. State representatives contacted Angela for input on drafting new legislation to better protect homeowners from unchecked HOA boards. Jenna gave a talk at a therapy conference titled "Gardens as Resistance: The Power of Place in Healing." I sat in the front row watching her speak with a scar still faintly visible on her cheek and fire in her voice. When we teach our children to grow, she said, we must also teach them how to protect what they've planted. It's been almost a year now. The roses are taller. So is Jenna. I still walk the perimeter of our house twice before bed. Some habits never leave you, but it's quieter now. Not silent, but peaceful. The kind of peace you earn. And sometimes when the breeze is just right, I catch the scent of lavender drifting through the air like a reminder that no matter how deep the damage goes, something beautiful can still grow from it. We sat on the porch last night watching the sun melt into the trees. Across the street, a new family moved into Vivian's old house. A little girl chased a puppy across the lawn, laughter echoing in the golden light. Should we tell them? Jenna asked, her smile returning. About what this neighborhood used to be. I looked around the trimmed hedges, the unlocked gates, the neighbors waving as they passed, and shook my head. No need, I said. They're moving into something better now, something we built together. And in that moment, as the first star blinked above the rooftops and the wind rustled the petals of a newly blooming rose, I knew we had done more than fight back. We had changed something. We had planted justice, and it was finally in full bloom. Sometimes the fiercest battles aren't fought on foreign soil, but right in our own neighborhoods, over the quiet things that matter most: peace, dignity, and the freedom to live without fear. In this story, Miles and Jenna Jennings didn't set out to challenge a corrupt system. All they wanted was to build something beautiful, a therapeutic flower garden that gave children with special needs a space to grow. But when power is misused, even something as innocent as a blooming rose can become a threat to control. The Jennings were targeted, humiliated, and even physically assaulted. But instead of retreating, they stood firm. And they didn't fight with fists. They fought with truth, with strategy, and with the strength of a community that remembered how to care for one another. The lesson here is clear. Never underestimate the power of quiet resilience. Miles didn't retaliate with violence. He responded with disciplined documentation and community outreach. Jenna didn't let fear stop her. She turned her pain into purpose, creating a space that helped others heal. Their victory wasn't just about defeating a corrupt HOA president. It was about restoring the heart of a neighborhood, one flower, one voice, and one act of courage at a time. To those listening, if you're facing intimidation, abuse of power, or feel like your voice doesn't matter, remember this story. Document everything. Build alliances. Stand your ground. There is power in patience, wisdom in restraint, and strength in numbers. Corruption thrives in silence, but it falls when good people speak up together. And no matter how small the injustice may seem, whether it's a flower bed, a flag, or a quiet protest, those moments matter. On behalf of everyone here at US Daily Story, thank you for listening to this powerful, true-to-life reflection. We share stories like this to remind each other that justice isn't just found in courtrooms or headlines. It's cultivated in our daily choices, in how we stand up, and how we lift up others. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of something you faced, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe because the next story might just be the one that gives someone the strength to finally speak up. Until then, take care, stand tall, and remember every garden worth growing faces a storm, but with care, it always blooms again.